Hi, my name is Christie Blatchford and I'm the courts columnist for the National Post. I bet if I were to ask you, how on earth in 2018 does a person end up with a grade 6 education? You would be surprised and probably outraged, and you'd say, where were that child's parents? And what on earth happened? And how come the teachers didn't do anything? And did nobody rush in to sort of help this child? Well, Abdoul Abdi ended up with a grade 6 education, and he did it as a ward of the state. He was a boy from Somalia originally, though he had never lived in Somalia. He was born to a Somali mom and a Saudi dad, and he was born almost, I think, 24 years ago in Saudi. He spent his first 2 years living in Saudi with his mom and his extended family. Then they end up in a United Nations refugee camp in Djibouti. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but it's a little tiny African country. And they spend 4 years in this refugee camp. And in that camp, his mom dies. So in 2000, his aunts and his sister and Abdul come to Canada as sponsored refugees, whereupon it was decided that, and we don't know why because much of this is secret, but it was decided that Abdul would be apprehended from his auntie's care. He then spends, I think he was 6 when he was apprehended, or 7 probably. He then spends the next dozen or so years, maybe a little less, being shunted from, at first, foster home to foster home, ultimately from group home to group home. He ends up going to 31 of these homes by the time he's 18, whereupon I guess he ages out. Unsurprisingly, because these are exactly the conditions we know produce troubled children, he ends up in trouble. And he ends up with a reasonably significant criminal record. He pleaded guilty to charges of aggravated assault, theft of a car, dangerous driving, and assault of a police officer with a car. And I guess the original charges had included attempted murder, but he pleads, so he's allowed to plead to a lesser charge. And it was a very violent and brutal offense, for sure. And he does 4 years in jail. And then, of course, Nova Scotia decides that while he's a permanent resident, his criminality makes him ineligible to become a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen. His aunt, who appears to be his de facto mom, one of them anyway, she applied for Canadian citizenship, I think in 2005. And as his aunt, she tried to apply for citizenship for Abdul as well, and she couldn't. The state said, the Nova Scotia government said, no, you can't do that. We're in charge of Abdoul Abdi, and we're the ones who have to apply for his citizenship. Well, they didn't do it. And as a result, Canada tried several times to deport him. When this second Federal Court of Canada decision came out a couple of weeks ago, the Public Safety Minister, Ralph Goodale, tweeted that we're not going to try a third time to deport Abdoul Abdi. He's going to be allowed to stay. Well, if he's going to be allowed to stay, I think the very least that we collectively owe him is a chance to formally become one of us. I'm not minimizing, and I'm not attempting to minimize that he was in serious trouble with the law. My point is that he was in serious trouble with the law as a creation of Canada, as a creation of the state, as a creature of Nova Scotia, and that all of those groups and agencies made him who he is. So now it is incumbent upon all of them also to first find out what on earth went wrong. How do you end up with a grade 6 education at the age of 24 in this country? He already is one of us. I think we should allow him to apply for citizenship. And if I were the Premier of Nova Scotia, I would be having a full-scale inquiry. Let's find out from him and from his sister what on earth went wrong and why none of those people who came into contact with him, the social workers, the supervisors, the schools, the teachers, the principals, why none of them intervened properly to get this guy some help.